To evaluate a first-time student, I check for three things. The first hurdle comes with itemization. It's a hard system to learn because it requires you to memorize a lot of new information, and that can be quite difficult. It also doesn't help that a lot of your game is influenced by how proficient you are in this subject. The next one comes along with tempo. Tempo is difficult for other reasons. Mainly, it's an abstract concept. I think without a high elo player or a coach to explain it and go through the concept with a lot of different examples to reinforce your learning, it can be really hard to pin down and something that you have to be consciously aware of every game when you make deliberate decisions. Let's say you decide to record a game and review your own game footage. It's actually quite simple to pick out mistakes in itemization or augment selection. But if you don't know what you're looking for, mistakes in tempo can be often hard to detect. The third hurdle is direction. Direction is understanding what comp you should be playing in your spot. And honestly, it can be quite difficult because people skip the first two hurdles and try to go straight to direction without fully mastering the first two. The second reason is direction often changes every patch and set. You have to relearn a lot of direction, and that makes it not that much of a priority to learn because the first two don't change and the third one changes quite frequently. So it's best to hammer in the first two and then learn the third one as it comes. So what even is tempo? It's the rate or speed of motion or activity. That motion or activity in TFT is the consumption of resources. So simply put, tempo in TFT is the rate at which resources are consumed. The more resources that are consumed, the higher the tempo is. So your main resources in TFT are going to be gold, items, time, and HP. HP is a resource, and many people don't think of it as one. And that is pretty important because HP can do a lot of things that gold can. Time is a resource that we're going to make a whole separate video about. We're not going to talk about it too much here, but it is definitely a resource, and it becomes a lot more relevant when you're trying to push much higher ranks. Let's use an example to explain lobby tempo. So let's say you have board 1. They spend gold or they slam items, and they become stronger because they spent resources. Now, the other people in the lobby, they have a choice. Either they can do the same to increase their board strength, or they can choose to lose that fight instead. Either way, they're spending a resource. Either they're spending gold or slamming items, or they're spending HP. Spending HP increases the tempo in the long term, because the more HP you burn, the quicker you have to start rolling. And you can also exchange HP for gold, right? Tempo is about managing your three resources, HP, gold, and items, and understanding when you get the most value out of them. For example, lose streaking early game is a good strategy because the amount of HP you lose at that time is at its lowest. If you lose streak later on, you still get the same amount of gold, but you lose a lot more HP. That applies with gold as well. When you roll a shop at stage 2, the things you're going to find in your shop are going to be 2 costs, 1 cost. But if you roll at level 8, the units you find are going to be much stronger. Your gold is more valuable to use for rolling later on, while gold early on is much better to make interest with. Some lobbies have higher tempo. That's just because they have more resources. So Scuttle Puddle, Crab Rave, they give you a lot more gold and a lot more items. Wandering Trainer is an additional prismatic augment, Prismatic Party is 3 guaranteed augments, and Loot Sub and Champion Conference gives you all sorts of other resources. The higher the elo, the higher the tempo as well. This is because high elo players know the optimal time to spend resources, and will be slamming items and spending gold a lot sooner. You can actually think of tempo like a race. In a low elo race, if you stumble or fall, it's pretty easy to pick yourself back up and join the rest of the pack. But in a high elo race, people are going to be running much faster. So if you stumble or fall, you're going to have a much harder time of catching up. So how do you actually use resources to maximize your tempo? How do you play tempo? So a quick overview here before we dive into examples, but items, you essentially want to focus on carousel picks, what item you're going to get off carousel, and with a mindset of making the item right away. What slams you're going to make, not greeting items. Strongest combination, that just means item plus unit, which is the best combination on your board. I think an example will make that a lot more clear. For gold, we have your classic rolls, levels, and roll downs. Rolls are slight rolls, roll downs are rolling a lot more, like your 4-2 roll down. And the new introduction of charms this set, where you can either choose to roll for a charm or spend money to buy a charm. Augments are going to be your classic tempo augments, like I'd say Keepers is one of them, which is also a combat augment, and item augments that just give you items early, which again, items early are very strong, and they give you a lot of tempo early on. Let's go with items first. The idea between item slamming is make items that make you the strongest now, but you also factor in components you need later for shred and anti-heal. Let's say on the far right is making your strongest item now, and the far left is making keeping components for shred and anti-heal. You want to find a balance. Essentially make the strongest items you can now while keeping your bow, belt, and rod open, because those are your anti-heal components. And then consider shred for AD or AP are slightly less important because there's so many ways you can get them into your comp. What are high tempo items anyways? So high tempo items are burn items. So that's usually your anti-heal items and your direct damage items. So burn is also a form of direct damage, but early on, direct damage items have an advantage because they do flat damage. Anything early game that is flat is always better early game. So we have examples of Deathblade, Warmogs, flat HP, flat AD, direct damage with Runon's Hurricane, direct damage with Spark, Bramble. Crown Guard gives you flat HP as well. This one's a bit confusing because I know Crown Guard, it gives you a flat HP based on a percentage of your HP already, but the fact that it gives you flat HP is what we're looking at. And the amount it gives is usually enough, essentially be considered a high tempo item. Armor and armor shred items are very strong early because most of the early game is going to be based around armor, because most comps are going to be doing AD. AP users won't be strong until later with actual mana items and higher cost units. That also makes armor shred a lot stronger because you are getting rid of the armor. So you'll notice that you have your 2 shred items for AP and your 2 shred items for AD. These ones shred MR and they do dark damage, while these guys only shred. You can see how they're balanced because armor, this is better early game, so they need to make up for it by doing direct damage as well. MR is not that important early on because there's not enough magic to even resist. Rageblade is like in its own jot note because Rageblade is just strong early game because fights are slow essentially, and this means that you'll get a max value out of it. It's also the best flat scaler for attack speed essentially, right? It just gives you a lot of attack speed and you can make use of it because fights are slow. You can think of it as a flat AD scaler because it just increases the amount of auto attacks you can do. And then mana items are similar to Rageblade where they just allow you to increase your damage a lot early game. For low tempo items, we have multipliers. So multipliers are very strong late game. As you know, if you're not multiplying a big number, the value is going to be a lot lower. So let's say you have a unit with a power of 1. You can do a flat damage item like Deathblade, which let's say gives a +5. Or we do IE, which gives you ×5. If you do Deathblade plus a unit, you do 1 + 5, so 6. If you do the IE times the 1 power 1 unit, you get 5. So Deathblade is better. Very rough example, but hopefully that makes sense. But once you have the Deathblade on the unit, and now has power level 6, and then you multiply by 5, you have power level 30. So that becomes a lot better. Healing items are very great as well because healing is based off the amount of damage you do. VT is okay because it gives you a HP shield, a lot like Crown Guard. But Hodge and Gunblade aren't going to be nearly as effective if you don't have that damage in the first place. So you want damage first. Also, healing items like Redemption work off percentage HP, and you have a low percentage HP early game, at least for the healing it does, and it's not going to be as good as just getting a Warmogs. MR Resist, we talked about this, is not going to be great, and Titans, Vow, QSS, Edge of Night, those types of units, those types of items aren't going to be good either because for their unique reasons. So Edge of Night has like no value early game because it's meant to be a counter for things that appear late game. Same with QSS, right? CC, anti-heal. You can sort of think of Edge of Night as a multiplier because the stronger the unit that holds it is, the stronger the item is. For instance, I don't really care if Akali 1 with just an Edge of Night finds its way into my backline and gets and procs Edge of Night and is hidden. She's not going to do much. But Olaf 2-star with 3 items with Edge of Night going hog wild in my backline is going to be a huge problem. Vow is the same reason where the stronger the unit it's on, the better it is, right? So if you're making a Tom Kench cast faster, amazing. But if you're making a Blitzcrank cast faster, it's going to be alright, but it's not going to have the same value, right? The power is letting it cast faster and not really in giving more defenses. Titans is just like, I know it gives flat AD, but it takes way too long for it to proc, and by the time it procs it early game, your unit's going to be like 20 HP left. It's just too slow to proc, and it only does really well with healing, where you can make use of the armor and effective HP multiple times by healing up. Think of those early items, and then look at these, and try not to make these items at the very bottom. Moving on to high tempo augments. Some augments are obviously going to give you more tempo early on. An example of a low tempo augment would be Unified Resistance. It doesn't give you a lot of power now, but later on, once you get more units and stats and MR become more important, it will be a lot stronger. But in the present, combat augments like Exiles will be much stronger early on because it gives you a lot of flat HP early on. Now again, it says 20%, but that's 20% is what it's using to calculate how much HP it should give you. What it actually gives you is a lot of flat HP. Big Grab Bag is a item tempo augment, so it gives you tempo through giving you items. Items are a lot stronger early on, and as you can see in the stats, it reflects this. It's best taken early on, and then after that, the stats drop off a lot more. Birthday Present and At What Cost can be considered peer tempo augments, and especially At What Cost is like the perfect example of what tempo is, right? It puts your board at the strongest point possible, and essentially it's saying that level 8 board that you want to get to, we're going to drop you off halfway to that point, and then you can figure out the rest from there. It's really, really strong, and those people who can understand tempo can actually like top 2 with it and go on like a 90 HP win or a 100% streak. Birthday Present is the same thing, right? It's encouraging you to push levels and essentially get rewarded even harder for playing tempo. There are rare instances of econ augments, I guess, that provide tempo. That's like escort quests, where same thing as Birthday Present, it does provide you bigger reward for doing your usual tempo plays. In a way, Birthday Present is an econ augment. I just think it's more combat related because it actually gives you the champion instead of gold. So why is tempo good? I kind of touched on it earlier, but essentially it's because we're rewarded heavily for playing tempo, especially this patch and this set, because of the introduction of charms and how flexible the set is. You're rewarded for making high tempo plays. And we can kind of explain that through a couple examples. This is the part where we're going to use like visuals and examples to reinforce what we learned so far. So in our spot, we're thinking about playing the strongest board, right? And we're playing Subservice, which gives you a bunch of 4 costs, and we're left with bow, rod, and tier on bench. That's what we want to focus on, is those items. What is the best slam here that we can make for tempo? What is the correct slam here? So I'll give you guys a second to figure that out. If you want to pause right here. For those of you still watching, I'm going to say that the board you should be making here is probably going to be Rise, depending on the patch, but I'm pretty sure it's like just play towards Rise here. I know the Karma, Nasus, and Fiora is kind of tempting, but if you hold all those units, you're not going to have a stable board until you have like an actual item you can play on Nasus or Karma, and it's going to cost you way too much gold. So I would just play towards Rise here. You already have the Zoe 2, and you have good frontline with a Warwick. The answer here is you make Shiv, and you leave Rod open. This is because Shiv, 1, is a high tempo item, and 2, this combination lets us keep a anti-heal component, which is Rod. If we did something like Rageblade, which a lot of people like to do, is that would be heavily incorrect because Bow and Rod kill both of our anti-heal components, and it also kills a form of shred we can get. We mentioned Rageblade earlier as a very high tempo item. This is a case where we have to meet in the middle and actually preserve a anti-heal component, or preserve the future, instead of focusing too hard on the now. We can get the same effect with Shiv that Rageblade provides, essentially, but this is a better outcome holistically. Rageblade also is an item where if you slam it on Rise, you can win the game without having a Rageblade, but you can't win the game without having Shred or anti-heal. So Rageblade would be the item that we don't really care about in this comp. Shiv is a correct slam, and then obviously of Carousel we would want a belt or another high tier component. Let's use another example. So this is from a VOD. I just copied the board from there, and I just want to use this as a learning experience. So the augment he had was Unleash the Beast. That's why he has Hysterics, and this is 2-1. He levels to 4, and he has a choice of to make items. So again, I will pause here and decide now what items you're going to do here. What plays are you going to make here? Right? It's just about what items you slam. If you said BT, you're correct, right? You're playing with Hysterics, so you're committed melee, and you're going to do BT plus Hysterics, and then kill Glove somehow later on, like preferably a Bow with Last Whisper, or maybe a Hodge with Tyr. But if you said put them on Nyla, that's where you're incorrect. And this is where we go back to that first drop note, or the third drop note, all the way back in the overview, where we talk about strongest combinations. So the item slam is correct, but putting it on Nyla is incorrect, right? We have a Nyla 1 here with no traits. The correct answer is to actually put it on Poppy. Poppy will make a stronger board with having these items. Not only does she have a trait activated, she's 2-starred, and she can actually utilize these items. I would not put it on Lilia because she can't use Hysterics very well. And Poppy can actually use Hysterics very well. She's probably one of the, if not, I think probably the best 1-cost holder, besides maybe Jace. I'd probably say Poppy's still better, though. That is something that people miss, is that the slam is correct, but the combination is incorrect. Let's go to a dish soap VOD. So this was back in 14.17, and this is a great example to show you guys the benefits of playing tempo. So in this spot, what would you do here? Pretend this is the start of the round. What moves are you making here? I'll give you a second. This is probably a longer pause. We want to talk about what items we slam here, what charms we buy, what units do we buy, do we level? And this is a choice you should be able to make without even scouting for the most part. I think scouting does help me make this choice, but I can probably make this choice without scouting. The answer here is you level to 7. Now let's talk about why. First of all, if we level to 7, we can still be above 30 gold. Going from 50 to 30 gold, we lose 2 gold interest. But we're on a force streak, right? So we're getting that money back if we win this. Second of all, we're going to level 7, so we have higher shop odds. So next turn, we're going to get a higher chance of getting 4 costs and a higher chance of 3 costs, which is very important in our spot because we really want to find a karma, or honestly, because we're playing karma, any 4 cost is really good for us. That comp can play like any 4 cost. Third of all, playing a unit in a spot makes our board significantly stronger, right? Right now, we're playing 3 Shapeshifter. So being able to play the Shravana here makes a much stronger board. And finally, I think overall, being able to keep our streak into wolves is a very important thing because we get extra streak money from PvE rounds. So I think this is a great time to level. This is what I mean when I said earlier about using the resources at the right time. So the benefits you get here for leveling, you can't get them again later on, right? Like this is the only time you can actually get these benefits. Being able to be level 7 now is much more important than being able to be level 7 2 rounds later because everyone else will be level 7, right? That's when being level 7 is the strongest. That's why at what cost is so strong, because it lets you be level 6 so much earlier than everyone else, which basically means that you're stronger than everyone else for so long. Same concept here. Even if we save all our gold and we don't roll or we do whatever, we actually continue our streak somehow, we get lucky with their matchmaking, we will actually still lose the benefits of 2 turns without level 7 odds, doing more HP damage to whoever we face, and being able to get all those benefits then, be able to get them after. Hopefully that kind of makes sense there. This is again, it's a very abstract concept, and it's easy to see like, oh, maybe blue buff slam is not correct, but being able to see whether the downsides of not doing something here is a lot harder to detect. The flip side of this is that I see a lot of people play too much tempo, and tempo, just because you spend resources doesn't mean you will immediately get tempo, right? So example like this is straight from a coaching VOD I had, I did of a student, and I just pulled this straight from like their game. Hopefully they don't recognize it, but essentially this is their board, and they leveled to 4 to play Namzi, and they had sword chain open. So you spend resources, but did your board get any stronger? It did, yeah. You get Namzi and you get an extra unit, that's some HP and some more damage. Is it really worth that amount of gold for that spike you got? No, right? Like not only do we lose 1 cost odds because we leveled to 4, we go from 75 to 55%, and we really want to upgrade our repairs, right? That can actually stabilize our board, but we also don't have any items to slam. We have a sword and chain open. I just have Edge Knight because the website doesn't let you have components. We're definitely not going to slam an item now, and it's not a high tempo item, and the Namzi is doing nothing to our board. So this would be an example of a moment where we spend resources, but we get very low tempo out of it. Whereas here is a spot where we spend a lot of resources, but we get an insane amount of tempo from the spot. If you take anything out of this video, getting there first and leaving before they catch up. What that really means can be visualized here. It doesn't matter if your carry doesn't have perfect items, right? In this stats, double rage by Callista is very, very good. It doesn't matter if you don't have this Callista, because if you have this Callista much earlier on, then you will beat the guys who are still on their Jinx or their Ash or whatever item holder they're using, right? By the time they catch up and they find their own Callista, they make up for the amount of HP and the gold they lost for greeting like perfect items and the amount of tempo they didn't have. You should be already stabilized and on your way to 9. Essentially, it's going to be like the last video or the last video I showed you about. It's like you're going to be like here, and then they're going to be trying to catch up. By the time they catch up to you, all ready to go 9, and you're just waiting there. You're gonna maybe lose 1 round depending on like how you played the game. Like eventually they will be stronger than you because they have a more optimized build, but the game doesn't last forever. The race eventually ends, right? So as long as you can outrun them, stay ahead of them until that happens, you win the game, right? It's like, again, we go back to that race analogy. It's like saying like you're in a race and you start like 100 meters in front of everyone else, right? But you run like way slower. Eventually they'll catch up to you and they will outrun you, right? But if the race like only lasts like 5 seconds, you still win, right? That's kind of the idea. And the tempo is kind of dictated by how far you are as a head start. Let's take this moment to talk about some tempo comp. So this is like the main part of this video has been explored, and I'm just gonna try to reinforce the idea through how tempo affects other parts of the game. TFT is not always about, it's actually not about at all about what your what your end game board is. It's about how you got to there in the first place, is what I always say. Right? There's 25 rounds in a game of TFT. It's about how you play those 25 rounds, not what your 25th rounds board looks like. And there are certain comps that really emphasize this. So any vertical based comp is considered a tempo comp. That's because the power of the comp is in the trait, right? 7 Frost, 8 Portal, 9 Fairy, or 7 Fairy. It is strong earlier, but it falls off. The power of the comp is in trait, right? So you need to have 7 Frost or 8 Portal. That means you usually need to play the 1 cost and 2 costs, which obviously makes your board weaker than people who have 4 and 5 costs. But that, because they play 1 and 2 costs, that is a earlier spike than the 4 and 5 cost boards. Much harder to get to, takes much longer. I'll see a lot of people who have like hit a 7 Frost board, but then they go bot 4. And it's like, yeah, you go bot 4 because everyone else is stronger than you, but you should have hit this board a lot earlier and bled out to a top 4. It doesn't always mean that with these comps shown here, you will always go like a top 4. There are ways to go first place. There are win conditions, right? But mainly it's about how quickly you can get to these breakpoints. So like Frost, if you hit a Diana 2 and get Hui 3, if you check the stats for it, it does really well. Frost in general is very strong right now, and then if you have the right augments for it, that also makes it really strong. 8 Portal is weird because like not only does it have an insanely hard spike at 8, it also caps out really high if you get the 5 costs, right? Like Nora Nami plus getting that Tarek, later Diana, really, really strong. So again, the reason Portal has been so strong is like the early game is basically your safe early game and then your safe late game, and then you actually have a way to cap out late game, right? With a bunch of different 5 costs. I made this video PowerPoint when Fairy was nerfed. So we're talking about 14.18 right now, and this was made during 14.17. So Fairy is a lot stronger now, and it's like one of the best verticals. But I think the idea remains the same. Like 7 Fairy isn't very strong or it's very strong, but it falls off hard because you're forced to play Lilia and units like Seraphine. But with a spat, obviously you get to drop one of them and play stronger ones. Melia was also not as effective in that comp because the units he's itemizing aren't as like high cost units, right? Like 1 cost, 2 cost again. Again, Melia is very strong right now, so it doesn't matter. Melia was insanely buffed between these patches. Same thing with a Shapeshifter, right? I think the most common comp with Shapeshifter is the Varus one. And that's the definition of like a tempo comp. That if you have that board on like stage 6, depending on the tempo of the lobby it's not gonna like do a lot, right? It needs specific augments and the ability to hit those 6, 8 shapeshifter breakpoints early as possible, right? It will always fall off. But again, like with Smolder 2, Randuin's augment, Briar 2 with items, it will cap out high. Any of these comps have a chance of winning, essentially, with the right conditions. Eldritch got mega buffed this patch for 14.18, so very strong. And if you have the right augments like School Mascot or Augment Eldritch +1, then you can easily go first. I'll talk about Fast 8 and Hero augments here. So Hero augments are basically reroll comps where you spike tempo really early, and then you ride off that wave and try to cap out. And then Fast 8 is you either win streak by playing a lot of tempo into Fast 8, and then you kind of lose tempo off that board. It just takes a bit longer to hit that spike, but when you hit it, it's a bit stronger. If your tempo kind of sucks, like early game, and like you're not in a spot where you can 5 streak, this is a question I'm answering because I think I got a lot of messages or a lot of comments in my last video talking about what do I do if I can't win streak or if I can't play tempo. This is more relevant for like last patch, but it's still kind of relevant now. It's like just default to like a reroll comp, right? A reroll comp is easier because you just get a tempo spike now, and then use the fact that you're kind of above everyone else as a stopgap. So to put it all together, highest tempo early game just consists of strong item slams, tempo augments, and leveling. If you don't get high tempo openers, then you're gonna have to you can still get benefits, but you're not playing tempo. You're gonna be greeting and for better items. You're gonna optimize and be less flexible. So if you're playing tempo, you have to be really open to playing whatever you hit, right? If you're going at 4-2 on your level 8 roll down, let's say you're playing towards Warrior Preservers, but like you need to be very flexible, right? You're gonna have to play Olaf over Fiora sometimes. You're gonna have to play like different forecasts like Taric or Nasus. You might not be able to play Preservers for a while. Might have to play Arcana. But when you're optimizing, you're usually lower HP, right? When you're not playing tempo, so you usually have a bit more gold too. So you're gonna roll down, and you're gonna have, instead of taking tempo augments, you're gonna be taking augments that are strong in the late game. So they're gonna be, most of those augments are usually very comp specific. So like little buddies, they only work really well in certain comps. You're gonna be trading that early game tempo and HP for like a really strong cap then. So you have less options to play. And then finally, you have to get lucky. You have to, I think it's a bit slightly riskier. That's why people don't want to play it as much, but you will eventually outcap, right? You will eventually outcap them. So you have to kind of play in a way where you can make it to the end. But that's it. Once again, if you guys liked the video and want to see more, feel free to comment what you want to see. Join the Discord for free coaching every Saturday, or I try to do every Saturday. And personal coaching is also in Discord as well. I'll see you guys next time, and let me know what you guys want to see. And want to see more, feel free to comment what you want to see. Join the Discord for free coaching every Saturday, or I try to do every Saturday. And personal coaching is also in Discord as well. I'll see you guys next time, and let me know what you guys want to see.